All right. Without further ado, let us get to Deacon Joe Grote. And so let me see if he is there. Deacon, are you on the line?
I am here.
Oh, fantastic. So Deacon Joe has been married for 47 years to his wife. They have 4 children and 5 grandchildren. He has led the fathers group at St. Ignatius for 18 years, coached for over 25 years, and is a member of the National Catholic Speakers Bureau. He's dedicated to bringing men back into their natural roles as husband, father, and friends. He does this in part through his latest book, Where Have All the Fathers Gone? This is going to be an awesome topic to talk about. Thank you, Deacon Joe, for being here. How are you today, sir?
I'm fabulous. A little cold here in Cincinnati today, but we got 5 inches of snow last night.
Oh, did you really?
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Okay. Yeah, it's been chilly here too. We didn't get that much snow, just got a little bit of it. But I think today, I don't know, haven't been outside all day. But I think it's a little bit warmer today. Is it warming up for you guys?
It's warming up. It's about 35 degrees.
Okay, there you go. Get a little bit of that snow to melt off. All right. Well,
Yes.
Deacon, I want to get right into this topic with you because this is something that's near and dear to my heart also. First, what was the inspiration for your book about fatherhood?
Well, as you mentioned, I've been a member of a fathers group since 1989. And, that really started to tell me about what it's like to be a husband, a father, and a friend, and how sharing how to be a husband, a father, and a friend with your kids, with your family, with the friends that you've met is so important because we all learn so much from each other. And we can't do it alone. And all of us have taken different walks through life, and you never know when you're going to need some advice on something you've never done before. So having a group of friends, a guys that you can share with is so invaluable. And that group that we started back in 1989 is still going to this day. And there are similar groups around, just like it all around the country, like That Man Is You, or Fathers, or there's different things that have morphed from that.
Yeah, I want to actually, I'm going to hold this up. Obviously, they can't see you. I can't see you either because you're on the phone. But anybody who's out there listening can't see us. But I am holding it up for those who look on or who are watching on YouTube, Facebook, or Rumble. So this is his book that I was holding up. Where Have All the Fathers Gone? Daily Thoughts for Dads, Dads to Be, and Papas. And I thought, would you be okay if I just read what today's was, Deacon?
I was hoping you would, because I've got it ready if you didn't.
Oh, well, go ahead. How about you
Oh.
read it, because you're the author, and that would be awesome for the people to hear today's little insight for fathers and coming straight from the author. That would be great.
Okay, great. Today's is titled "Slow Down During December." In years past, does it seem like as soon as Thanksgiving is over, Christmas happens too quickly? Especially if you have children, the season can pass before you know it's over. Find some time to slow down this Christmas season. You can even sit with your wife and decide that on one day each week, you and your family will stay home and enjoy the spirit of the season simply by being together. Maybe you can make some popcorn and watch a Christmas movie. Maybe you can bake some cookies and sing Christmas carols. A game night can bring the family closer. Take time to plan on slowing down this Christmas season. I'll bet you find that not all gifts are placed under the tree. Some of them are sitting right next to you as you ponder the reason for the season.
And then down at the bottom, I love that you have this little, just kind of a quick something to do. And this one says, "Did you tell your wife you love her today?" And
Yeah.
so what a beautiful message. I'm going to take a very quick break because I want to get right back into that. But I also want to congratulate and thank some people. First, I want to congratulate Claire Beasley, who is the trivia winner. So the question was, which of these platforms does Divine Mercy Radio not stream on? Correct answer there is Twitch. We are on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble. So those who are out there watching on that, thank you very much for using those platforms. I also want to thank an anonymous donor who gave us $1,000, and with our other pledges, with our matching pledges, that becomes a $2,000 donation. So thank you so very much for that. If you want to join with that anonymous donor, call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. Let's get those phones ringing off the hook. Let's use up all of our matching funds as quickly as we can. Let's get to our goal of $125,000 faster than we ever have. And we will continue proclaiming the gospel the best that we can. Right now, we're able to do that. We're proclaiming with Deacon Joe Grote, and he wrote this book, Where Have All the Fathers Gone? We're talking about in the image of the Father, how to bring back true understanding of what fathers are. So, Deacon, let's get right back into that, because I look around the culture, and first, let's be honest, I'm not perfect. None of us are. But I'm trying, and I'm sure you are too, Deacon. But as we look around the world, we see lots of things that are wrong. Fatherless homes, absent fathers, Disney dads, things like that, where it's not, we either don't have a father there, or the father's absent, or the father's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. So what other things can you tell us that you were looking around and seeing that caused you to say, you know what, I need to get a message to fathers out there today?
Now, I'm going to give you a stat that really shocked me when I was investigating for my book. In 1960, 5% of the kids in America did not live with their father. And by the year 2000, it was over 50%.
Wow.
Those numbers alone are enough to just stop you in your tracks. And I came across the quote from a conference in 2010 that it's easier for a child to reconcile with the fact that his father has died than it is to reconcile with the fact that there's a man alive who wants nothing to do with him.
Wow.
When I first read that, because I've been loved all my life. My father passed 9 years ago, but I always knew my dad, and lots of my friends always knew their dad. But it just shocked me to find out that 50% of the country doesn't live that way. And, so I started trying to figure out, how did we get here and what can we do about it? And, we're just not connecting as a society as we did in the past. Cell phones and computers are replacing, human touch. We don't know how to speak one-on-one with each other. And I also thought, how many close friends does any man really have? And this goes back to the fathers group or the TMIY groups. Who can I go to if I have a problem? Let's say I'm a married guy and things just aren't going right with my wife, or I've got a problem with one of my kids, and I'm not going to share with. I share with my wife, but I got a problem, but I'm not sure how I'm going to handle it. And if I've got a group of guys that I'm can speak to in confidence, you're golden. You've got a bunch of guys that are, even if it's just one or two, it's better than having none. And so we need to, as men, seek that out. There's so much in the culture that tells us, go on your own. You can do this on your own. Forget about your wife and family. And obviously that's not working. So we need role models. We need people that know what's going on and know how to connect you with people that can help you, get back to your family.
Yeah, I think if we look at a lot of the statistics out there and see the damage that fatherless homes causes, it's hard to argue with the evidence. And we know, because of how God made us, that fathers are so very important. And so as you're writing your book here, obviously looking at that must have had an impact. But what other things were there that you were looking at and you were like, you know what, we have to get men back to being who God created them to be?
I wrote a letter to the editor of the Cincinnati Enquirer back in 2010. I'd never done that before, and but I was inspired to write it because this was the week leading up to Palm Sunday in 2010, and in Cincinnati during that 1 week span, 8 young men between the ages of 15 and 25 had been killed. There was one killed each night, and one night there was 2. And I was reading the paper each morning and reading about these deaths. And there was always the grieving mother, the grieving aunt, the grieving neighbor. Literally, in not one of those articles was there a mention of a father. And it just hit me. I thought, that's the problem, but they're not addressing it. And every article they wrote said that, we need better jobs, we need better education. And so I wrote a letter to the editor, and in the first paragraph, I said, there's nothing wrong with good education. There's nothing wrong with good jobs. But until we start hearing about a grieving father in these instances, we're not going to make a dent in the problem. And they actually published my letter on Palm Sunday. They asked for my picture. I sent my picture, and the reaction I got was pretty immediate. My mom called me, my aunt called me, but I had a few other people call me. But on Tuesday of that week, I had a preacher from, the northern part of Cincinnati who had a community of followers, and he said, we need to talk. He said, this is the biggest issue in my group of people, in my assembly, and we need to do something about this. And so that's really where the impetus for this came. Is I thought, if people need to be aware of what's going on, and I've been working on this off and on ever since. And in 2023, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article written that basically said the same thing, that the single most important factor in breakdown in the family and breakdown in society is fatherless homes. And he basically said the same thing, that jobs are great, education is great, but we got to get guys back into their homes. So those articles were 13 years apart. In the meantime, more and more families are falling apart, and we just need to address it.
Yeah, and I think part of that problem too, just within our own culture, is you hear people screaming toxic masculinity and stuff like that, and so you have a bunch of young men growing up thinking that even being a man is a bad thing, and trying to figure out, how do we navigate this? How do we understand? What am I supposed to be? And so that's where our Catholic faith, I think, has that background that we need to understand, who are we as children of God first, but who are we when we're created males? And what does that really mean? So what would you say then as to how you define the mission of a Catholic father in today's world?
Well, he has to be there for his kids, first of all. That's the biggest thing. I write about that in my book on a couple of occasions, that being there is the first thing, and then secondly, when your kids are young, get down on your knees with them, look them in the eye, play with them, read to them, form a bond when you're younger, and they'll want that bond when they get older. You look at men who are successful in their lives and their kids are going to church. It's because they go to church with their kids. Kids are more apt to go to church if the father takes them. The mother, seems like they drag them. I hate to say it that way, but I've read more and more about this, that if a father's leading the religion in the home, the kids are going to follow. And if the father's not following a religion, then the kids are going to look for it someplace else.
Yeah, there was actually a study done several years ago about that, and that's one of the major things that they found. I want to take a very quick break here to remind people that you're listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Fall Carathon, Light in the Darkness. Deacon Joe Grote is with us, and he's talking about a book that he wrote, but also talking about the problem of absent fatherhood in homes, and us getting back to what we need to be as fathers, especially Catholic fathers, so that our children don't grow up with the same problems that a lot of our society is, but instead they know that they have an earthly father and a heavenly father that loves them. If you're enjoying what we're talking about here, call in to 785-621-4110. If you have a question for Deacon Joe, we'll get it on here. You can even text that same number. If you want to help us to continue program like this and continue helping us to evangelize, call that same number, 785-621-4110. We still have plenty of those matching funds left, and we want to get them used up. The people who give them to us believe in us, they believe in you, and they want to entice you to join with them in supporting this station. So please do that. Call 785-621-4110. You don't have to give $1,000. If you can, that's great. But whatever you can give, whatever the Holy Spirit is guiding you and saying, hey, I'd like you to partner with them, please consider that 785-621-4110. And let's see how much of that, how many of those matching funds we can get through before the end of the day. I want to get back to speaking with Deacon Joe Grote about In the Image of the Father. So, Deacon, we were
Can I
talking.
interrupt
Yeah,
you a second? And
absolutely.
I'd love to tell you a story about the mission of the Father and how kids watch their fathers. About 15 years ago, my oldest son was running in a triathlon, a mini triathlon, and it was up at an area called Houston Woods here north of Cincinnati. And he had a 3-year-old son that came with us, and we got to watch them swim. We got to see them get on their bikes, and they rode their bikes for 15 miles. And they came back, and they were going to do 6 miles of running, and they were going to do 3 2-mile loops. And his 3-year-old son didn't know that. He was just, wondering where his dad was. And so they came by the first time in the loop, and his son tried to catch up with him, and he couldn't catch up with him. And I said, Jake, when your dad comes through again the next time, I'm going to make sure you catch up with him. And so without me saying another word, he took his hat off, and he took his shirt off, and he tied his shirt around his waist, and he put his hat on backwards. He said, that's because my dad's got his hat on backwards and his shirt is tied around his waist. And when he came around the next time, he was able to literally be in lockstep. And I took a picture of them running, and literally they looked like a matching copy of each other with their hats backwards and their shirts around their waist. And it hit me how influential a father can be. That kid wanted to be exactly like his dad. But who is that kid going to model if he doesn't have a dad around to model?
Yeah. Wow.
The other part that I'd like, especially this time of year, are traditions and, Catholic families and tradition besides Christmas Mass or midnight Mass, whatever Mass you go to. I have a Lionel train that my father bought for my oldest brother back in 1952, the year that he was born. And my brother went on to have a pretty big display of trains in his basement, but he never really wanted the original one because it didn't fit. It was a different, scale. And so I have that train. And tonight, literally, one of my grandsons is coming over, and we're going to start that train for the first time this year.
Wow.
And every time we do that, we send it out to say it's still running. And, but it's a tradition in our family, and it's something everybody talks about. Everybody wants to be part of. And the traditions like that are things that keep families together.
Wow, that brings up another good point, I think. Then, if that's what keeps families together, obviously there are things that a father is going to need. And so, what are some of the virtues that you think are essential for fathers to have today so that kids can pick up on them and take them into their own lives?
First of all, pray with your kids. Not so much a virtue, but pray with your kids, and especially at dinner. If you're out in a restaurant, our kids do this with us. They know that no matter where they're at, they're going to have to pray, and the grandkids know it as well. And luckily, our grandkids want to lead the prayer at times, and it's not always the perfect prayer, but it's a prayer, and they look forward to doing that. Then patience, it's not a theological verse, but virtue, but it's just so important, especially when you speak. Think before you speak, and watch how you correct your children and grandchildren, especially if you might have to admonish them. Make sure it's done privately. Don't do it in front of their other their siblings, and especially don't do it out in public in front of them. But everybody needs to be corrected at times, but you have to be patient and do it the right way. And then fortitude. Don't be afraid to stand up for what's right. Society at large is working against us. We talked about that just a few minutes ago. There's, the toxic masculinity and everything, but have the fortitude to be a man and face difficulties with a cool head and an open heart. And people will recognize that. And then obviously temperance, self-control, keeping your head when everybody around you is losing theirs. We mentioned in the introduction that I coached for 25 years. There are some times I would like to take back some of the things I did as coach. And I always realized that when I did have a problem was when I had a really bad day at work, and I, took that out on the umpire or took it out on one of the kids, and just frustration of the day. But keep under control. And then lastly, be generous, especially with your time for your family and friends. I think that's the greatest thing you can teach your kids is family time should be utmost importance. My wife is spectacular about that. If one of our kids calls and says we need a babysitter and we've got plans for the night, we say, yeah, we're available, and we change our plans. Be generous with your time, because you're only gonna have so much time with your family and your grandkids, and you have to be generous with that time.
Yeah, I think you could probably agree with me when I say this next thing that our kids are like sponges, and they're going to soak up the good and the bad that you do. So sometimes they'll do something, and there have been times when I've had to look at my wife and go, "Ooh, yeah, that one's me. Sorry."
Yep.
You
Yep.
know,
No,
and
yeah.
so
I
go ahead.
go ahead. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And a lot of luckily there's probably more of the good that the kids do that they don't know that you do because they watched you. But yeah, there's sometimes when you cringe and think, oh, I probably, yeah, I probably taught them that, and I really didn't want to.
Yeah. And so, you bring up patience. And one of the things that I listen to Dr. Ray Guarendi, he's one of my favorites. And I'm sure I'm not going to get this completely right, but he talks about frustration and impatience comes from the way that you want something to be as opposed to the way things are. And so, as you talk about patience and fortitude, that's one of those big things that it's real easy for anybody to fly off the handle. What's difficult always is to grow in virtue, but it's the difficult thing that your kids are going to notice. They'll pick up on if you just fly off the handle, and they'll learn to do the same thing. But they're also going to pick up on, wow, that was a really stressful situation, and dad handled that amazingly. And so then when they get into that situation, it's more likely that they will model that same type of behavior, because they're like, well, that's what a strong man does. A strong man doesn't just bend everybody else to his will. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And maybe you can then further that thought into what are some of the struggles then that what are some of the other struggles and obstacles that fathers are dealing with today?
Yeah, I think the first thing comes to mind is finding time for spiritual growth. We're all so busy, especially with those with young kids, and you've got so many things to do, and just literally taking care of them on a daily basis until they can take care of themselves. So finding time for spiritual growth is vitally important. I remember guys that were in our fathers group back in the day who didn't even have kids yet, and now I see those kids of those, they're in their 40s, 30s and 40s, and I see the way those kids turned out. And it's because that their dads took time to be part of the fathers group, to spend time in church, to go to retreats like Christ Renews and Cursil or any number of those. But literally just finding quiet time every once in a while for yourself. And also, I had this in my book, make sure your wife can get that quiet time as well. Because when you both have time for quiet time, you're going to really appreciate it, and you're going to appreciate each other more, for providing that time for each other. And one of the biggest things we need to do in this day and age is to just put our phones down. We are just so connected with our phones. I could go to restaurants, I go to events, and I guarantee you that if you're in an event with 1,000 people and the majority of the people are under the age of 30, they have their phone in their hand, the vast majority of them, the entire time. And it's like a separate appendage. And I just feel so sad for them, because they are just so connected to that device in their hand that they just don't realize the dependence on it. And so I try to, whenever our kids are around, I put my phone away. When our grandkids are around, I put my phone away. There's nothing more important. If the phone rings, I'll go answer it. But I do not sit with my phone in my hand whenever our kids, our grandkids are around. And then the other thing that is an obstacle because of how interfered we are is nobody reads anymore. Our attention span is so short. It's shrunk so much. That's why my book is 365 individual thoughts. When I started this 6 years ago, I thought I'm going to write a novel, about all the stats that I had, and I'm going to put all this together. And I got about 2 chapters into it, and I thought, nobody's going to read this. I might like it that I produced it, but nobody's going to read it. And so I literally put it away for about 18 months to 2 years. And then it hit me the way that I could, do it was in short snippets. And I think it's the success of the book has shown that I chose the right thing there. But, we really need to, find time to read, because unless you're reading good books, you're not growing in your faith. And my project when I became a lay pastoral minister before I became a deacon was to start a Catholic book club. That was 7.5 years ago, and we still have that book club going. And it's been great because we've read some incredible books, and I've been able to share those books with people who had a lot of different thoughts about the books than I did, and it's just golden. We wish we could do more a year. We do 2 or 3 a year. But I really encourage people to read, turn off the TV and read, and read the Bible regularly as well.
Yeah, we all know that we get no spiritual edification when we're just scrolling anyway. And a lot of times we're like, this is so boring. I wish I had something else to do. So your advice is very good and it's very practical. Simply put down the phone, pick up something good to read. I would even say you can even start with the Lord of the Rings or something like that. That's not a now that can be difficult to read through. So maybe don't start with that. But my point is there are still some good things out there that are works of fiction, but they have very good stuff in them. You don't have to start with St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa. Right. You can start with something that helps you to learn to like to read and then graduate up from there. Or just start with the Gospels. I mean, there's nothing better to start with than those. So that's kind of really good practical advice. Just put the phone down. Just start reading. Plus, we all know that reading to your children, reading out loud to them, that's one of the greatest gifts you can give to your kids, is helping them to learn how to read, how to love to read, and it just opens up their mind. So thank you so very much for that practical advice. Is there other practical advice you would give us? Because everybody knows this. I don't think there's a single person out there that doesn't know my phone is a deterrent to my happiness. It's not actually what brings happiness. So are there other things out there that you would say is practical advice for us to be able to say, I need to stop doing this and I need to do more of this?
I think we need to just look at the sacraments more, look at our faith more. You don't have to go to church for that. You can, praying the rosary is not a sacrament, but it is a devotional. And, even if you just say a decade a night with your kids to get in that habit. I know a family, they have 10 children and they say the rosary every night after dinner. And their kids are now, I think the youngest is like 20, the oldest is about 45. But when you go to their house, even if they have a family affair or a party after dinner, they say the rosary. And if you don't want to participate, they don't care, but they're going to do it anyway.
That is great.
That's a great way to start. Frequent communion is something that people, I think, take for granted or don't take advantage of enough. I try to get to Mass 3 or 4 days a week. I wish I would get there more often. But not only am I getting frequent communion, I'm around some really like-minded people that I want to be part of. I want to share my life with them. And then spending time in adoration. I did not really learn about adoration till I was in my early 40s, I would say. And I wish I had more time to go on a regular basis, but the growth that I have at adoration, you talk about silence and putting your phone down and having to listen. I mean, when I first started adoration, it was all about me. I was doing all the talking. And then I realized one year or one night that I said my piece and I just sat there. And I continue that practice to this day. Is I just shut up and maybe say some prayers, but just being in God's presence allows you to, chill out, so to speak, and open your mind up and listen. And we just don't listen well anymore because we want to be the masters of our own time. But adoration is just something that I've not taught my kids it yet. I hope they're going to get to that sometime. But adoration is something that we need to do more of.
Absolutely. Want to break in really quickly and do a second trivia question of the hour. So if you get this right, we will put your name into the drawing for a gift certificate to Messenger Traditional Catholic Books and Gifts, and we'll draw that name at 6 o'clock. First person to get the correct answer gets their name put in that drawing. Call 785-621-4110. That's 785-621-4110. Here is your question. Which of these shows Divine Mercy Radio? Which of these shows does Divine Mercy Radio not record in their own studio? Is it A, Double-Edged Sword, B, Catholic Answers, C, Faith Driven Finance, or D, One Body? Which of these shows does Divine Mercy Radio not record in their own studio? A, Double-Edged Sword, B, Catholic Answers, C, Faith Driven Finance, or D, One Body? Call us 785-621-4110. Also, if you're driving along, if you're walking and listening, if you're in your house cooking, whatever you're doing, and you can hear this, if you would like to partner with us, call that same number, 785-621-4110, and let's get those donations rolling because we are in our fall carathon, Light in the Darkness. We are having some amazing conversations with people. Right now, we're talking with Deacon Joe. We're talking about the importance of fatherhood. So if you appreciate what we're talking about here, call 785-621-4110 and help us to chip away at that goal of $125,000 so that we can make sure that we can keep putting out quality programming and keep putting out the gospel message so people who are driving down the interstate, people who are north and south of the interstate, everybody in our listening area can get the message of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, and understand how to apply his life to ours. 785-621-4110. All right, Deacon Joe, getting back to you. So you were talking about the importance of the sacraments in strengthening a father's vocation. One of them that I want to hit that we haven't yet is how important is the sacrament of reconciliation?
I didn't find out till later in life myself on that. I did Christ Renews his parish in 1988 when I was 33 years old. And Saturday night of the Christ Renews weekend, they offer reconciliation. And I remember to this day, the first words to the priest when I went in reconciliation was, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. My last confession was 10 years ago." And my immediate thought before I said anything else was, what kind of Catholic am I? And I have gone to reconciliation at least every 6 weeks or so since, sometimes monthly, it really depends on schedules and things like that. But it has really changed the way I practice my faith, the way that I am around people, because I'm more aware of the sins that I'm committing if I'm going to reconciliation on a regular basis. But the peace and the freedom that I get when I go to reconciliation, knowing that I have been freed of those sins, is something you just can't describe. And I'm blessed that being a deacon, I have a spiritual director who's a priest. And, I'm actually going this Friday to him for spiritual direction. And I always get reconciliation when I go. And I can't emphasize enough how important, and my wife would tell you the same thing, that she's a, regularly attendee of reconciliation as well. And it's just the blessing that we need to share more with those of our faith.
Yeah, I think that something that was passed on to me years ago comes to mind also, and that is to pay attention. And if you haven't been to reconciliation a while, you might notice that you're more angry, you're more ill-tempered, you have a quicker fuse, things like that. But also notice what happens to your family. And that was very good advice to me, because I realized that if I haven't gone to confession in a while, then I do notice that about myself. I notice that I don't handle things as well. I notice I'm more impatient. I'm less charitable to those around me. And then when you're starting to look and you're like, oh, my children have been kind of snippy recently. They've, this and this and this has been raising its ugly head. Oh yeah, I haven't been being a very good spiritual head. But it goes the other way also, that if you are being a good spiritual head, you might notice that, like, man, God blessed me with some really good kids, and so that's just one of those things where you notice that when your relationship with the Lord is right, that your relationship with your family tends to be right also.
I couldn't agree with you more. And can I interject something?
Oh,
Because I know
absolutely.
I know that people, yeah, I mean, you'd like them to listen to the entire show, but if they're interested in the book, they can go to deaconjoegrote.com, and Grote is spelled Grote. So deaconjoegrote.com.
Absolutely. So let's get back to talking about it then, and let's discuss some more about what are other ways that fathers can nurture that strong Catholic identity in their children, and hope that they carry it on as they grow up and become adults themselves.
Yeah. Well, praying is the first. We talked about that earlier, but praying before meals. Volunteering at Mass as a lector or a Eucharistic minister. Kids see that. I'll never forget, or maybe even an usher. There was a family of children. There was 7 kids in the family, and at a very young age, this gentleman was he was ushering all the time. He was probably 35, 40 years old, and I'll never forget one time one of his kids just ran up and jumped into his arms as he was ushering, and instead of kind of shushing the kid away or giving back to mom, he just held him as he was ushering. And those kids all became ushers over time. We used to go to Mass. The whole, like the 6 ushers were this man and his 5 kids. Just think it. And one of those kids literally is becoming a priest now.
Yeah.
So just seeing their dad being an usher made them want to be part of the faith. If your church has any kind of service opportunities, maybe with St. Vincent de Paul or for mission work, volunteer for things like that, and make sure you take your kids with you. And then OCIA or RCA, depending on what you call it, let kids know that you're part of that. I have, heck, 20 some years ago, I sponsored the first person, and I made sure our kids knew who that person was, and we've got a relationship with the person to this day. And then I'm a regular. I help run our RCIA, our OCA here at our family of parishes, and so the kids always talk about that. But the one thing that I really stress. I'm so blessed as a deacon. I do most of the baptisms at our church here at St. Michael's, and my homily every time I do baptisms is the same, and that is we give away to each family that's with the child a holy water vial, a bottle they can take home with them, and I tell them to go home at night that night and spread a few drops of the holy water on their bed and on their children's bed and say the Our Father. And I go on a bit about why I say that, but I can't tell you how many times I have an aunt or an uncle or a grandmother come up and say, "Hey, can I have a bottle of that too?"
Yeah.
It's something that I know families are doing it because I see them come back and fill up the bottles, at church. And it's just something that if we can get to start and do that when the kids are, babies, and if they do it for the rest of their lives, just think of that impact that's going to have on those kids if they see mom and dad praying like that every night.
Absolutely. Want to take a quick break here, and I want to congratulate Sherry Weber. Sherry is a wonderful listener and supporter of Catholic Radio. So congratulations, Sherry. She answered the trivia question. The question was, which of these shows does Divine Mercy Radio not record in their own studio? And the correct answer there is Catholic Answers. I love Catholic Answers, but that comes to us from EWTN itself. And so thank you, or congratulations, Sherry. We'll get you put into that drawing. But then also thank you to an anonymous donor who gave us $100, and that becomes $200 with our pledges that we got are matching funds. Sorry, sometimes the old brain gets a little bit slow there. But if you want to join with that anonymous donor and you're driving down the road and thinking, you know what, I think I could do that first, pull over. But then give us a call, 785-621-4110. If you're cooking, if you're walking, if you're running, working out, whatever you're doing, 785-621-4110. You probably need a little bit of a breather anyway. 785-621-4110. Join with us and continue to put the gospel out there. All right. Want to get back to Deacon Joe Grote, and we're having a great conversation about the importance of fatherhood. So Deacon Joe, one of the things that we were talking about as we took that short break there was nurturing that identity in your children. And likely they will carry that on when they become adults themselves. And so how has being a father yourself, learning to grow in virtue and learning to lead your children, what are the challenges that has caused in your own life, but also how has that deepened your own faith?
Yeah, the challenge to me was just how can I be a better Catholic? How can I be a better man? And like I mentioned that I did Christ Renews in 1988, and then the group of guys that I did that with, we started the fathers group at our parish the following year in 1989. And I really didn't know what the effect that was going to have on my life and my kids' life until years later. But it also, the impact it had on our wives when you were with the group of guys that all the fathers were together, all the wives of the fathers were together, and just the camaraderie that we had and the fun that we had, but the faith that we shared, like when there might have been a sickness in one of the families or someone lost a mother or father unexpectedly, you really are there for those folks because you've got a relationship with them, you're walking with them, and you know how they're hurting, and the ability to share that with them helps them get through those times that are tougher. And then I'm sure maybe you know what Cursillo is, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in 2003, I did a Cursillo weekend, and it was on that weekend that I met a deacon. I knew who deacons were, but I never really met a deacon as closely as I met the one who was on that weekend. And I looked at him, I thought, that's the kind of guy I'd like to be. And that really planted a seed in my head. At that time, I was way too busy with life and raising kids. And I didn't think about becoming a deacon, but I thought I'd like to be like that man. And then years later, when I started the lay pastoral ministry program, I really wasn't intended on becoming a deacon. I wanted to be a DRE, or I wanted to teach high school religion. And about a year into that program, two separate people who didn't know each other said, have you ever thought about becoming a deacon? And so the rest, as they say, is history. I took their advice or took the impetus they gave me, and I'm a deacon now for 3.5 years. And so it's being open to those challenges of hey, what's the next step you can take? I did Christ Renews, I did Fathers, I did Cursillo, and then I took the step to become a deacon. Not everybody's going to do that, but you just have to open up yourself to those challenges and see where it takes you.
Fantastic. So challenge yourself a little bit, but what are some other maybe daily habits that can help fathers grow in holiness?
Well, you set me up really well with the day that you picked for me to read today, when it said at the bottom of the page, did you tell your wife you love her today? In each of the entries in my book, at the bottom of each day, there's a short line like that. There's 5 of them. And the people who read my book, they love that little refresher each day. And I'm going to go through the 5 very quickly here because they are all so important. We already mentioned, did you tell your wife you love her today? The second one is, did you tell your kids you love them today? It's amazing how many guys don't tell their kids they love them. I have a story I tell when I give a speech about a woman who was dying. This is a true story. She was about 88 years old. She was close to death. She was in a retirement center, and she had 2 of her daughters come visit her. The one daughter was from out of town. The one was from Cincinnati. And the 2 daughters came to visit her one day, and they knew it was pretty much towards the end. And the mother looked at them and said, "I love you both so very much." And they stayed for about another hour, and they had driven together. They went out in the car, and literally when they got in the car, they both broke out crying. They said, "That's the first time Mom ever told us that she loved us."
Wow.
That just hits me to the core. I've always been loved. My parents, my mother especially told us they loved. Dads aren't always this quick to tell you to love her, but man, my kids know that I tell them I love them, and they tell me, and then they tell their kids, and our grandkids tell us. I can't tell you how much that means to people to be able to share that. So I digress. Another one is, whose day did you make today? What can you do to somebody today, even if it's just giving a smile to a stranger when you're walking down the street, or you're at lunch and you see somebody, you strike up a conversation with them. Another one is, say a prayer today for one of the blessings in your life. We talk about quiet time, and sometimes we don't realize the things that are important in our life until they're too late. And so, what can you say today as a prayer for one of the blessings in your life? And then lastly, did you call or text a friend a message of hope today? You can really surprise people out of their comfort level by somebody, especially you haven't talked to them for a while, but you heard that they were suffering, you heard that something's going on, or maybe you heard something really good for them or one of their grandkids. Just send them a little note, text them or call them and say, "Hey, congratulations on it. I saw your grandchild's got a scholarship to college, or your granddaughter, got an award at school for whatever it might be." Share those things. Let them know that you're thinking about them. It really goes a long way, and then they're going to start doing the same thing back to you over time.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing those with us, especially one of the simple ones that you shared is simply just smiling at someone. So have you made someone's day today? It's amazing how just even walking down the street, you're walking into, your local grocery store or whatever it is. And sometimes you see people just kind of head down. They look like maybe they're not having the best day. And usually we want to kind of avoid that. And we're kind of like, oh, I don't really want to, but you'd be amazed at how often, if you just say good morning, or good afternoon, how you doing? And smile, it's amazing how it just lifts their countenance. They look up, and a lot of times you can tell it takes them off guard, but they
Exactly.
also smile back, and it's just like, huh, that was ridiculously simple.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
so
I find myself, you don't know everybody at mass. You know that they go to mass regularly. If you go to mass regularly, and you run into them in the grocery store or the hardware store, and you don't even know their names, but you smile and say hello to them because you've got that, you share the Lord with them,
yeah.
and so why not then go to the people you don't know and share that same thing, and maybe they'll think, boy, what's up with that person that's so happy,
Absolutely. That you bring up another good question there then of how can our parishes and our Catholic communities better support fathers and families in their roles?
Yeah, we need family activities beyond sports. I'm the first to admit I'm a huge sports nut. Our kids are all involved in sports. Our grandkids are all in sports, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong, but we don't get connection sometimes with sports because we're so into the schedule, and we go to the game and then it's done and we go home. So we need more maybe volunteer opportunities in communities for families to get together. Church picnics are really important. In Cincinnati, it's kind of popular for churches to have at least an annual picnic, if not, a few of those. And then I'm big on talking to people after Mass. I love when, you should hopefully be in a great mood when you're coming out of Mass. And, everybody walks out of Mass and they go to their cars. And I try to, especially when I diaconate and I'm shaking people's hands after Mass, and little guys, I try to give me a knuckles or a high five or something. It's just, things like that you never know that little connection you're going to make with somebody to support them. And then also getting dads into schools. for any number of things, especially in schools that, some of the kids don't have a lot of the dads around. I've heard that some people say there's a detriment to that because the kids that don't have a dad, feel out of place. We got to make sure we reach out to those kids and make them feel just as good as your own kids feel or your own grandkids feel. But we have to have presence in schools so that kids can see what a dad can be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, yeah, rather than shying away from it and being like, well, I think some kids are going to feel bad. I think exactly like you said, well, approach those kids, give them a fist bump, ask them how they're doing, let them see what a good male role model is. Because if they don't have one in their lives and nobody's modeling it for them, well, then nobody's modeling it for them. They need somebody to model that for them. So I really appreciate you bringing that one up. Want to take a quick break and remind people that you're listening to our fall carathon, Light in the Darkness. We still have that carathon goal of $125,000. We've been chipping away at it all day long, but please help us use up our matching funds. Like I said, at the 4 o'clock hour, I'm going to see if I can get us an update. We'll see where we're at on our funds and how many of those matching funds we've used up. We've got to be under 40,000 now, but we have plenty of them left. People donate them to us for the sole purpose of being able to make sure that when you donate, their dollars will match it. And then all those funds together go into helping us continue with this mission. We're talking with Deacon Joe Grote, having a great conversation. Please let us know what you think. Please call in if you have any questions to 785-621-4110. And also call that number to give us your donation. $20 a month, $20 total, $100 a month, $100 total, whatever it is, 785-621-4110. If you can partner with us and help us to continue this mission. All right, back to Deacon Joe. Deacon, we've got a few minutes left here, so maybe we can get your final thoughts on what do you hope that fathers take away from your book, and where can people find that and get a hold of you?
Okay. The biggest thing is you don't try to do this alone. You're not going to be a successful father on your own. You have to rely on your wife. You have to rely on your family. You have to rely on friends. You have to rely on coworkers. Reach out. If you don't reach out, you're never going to know how much more you can grow by doing so. You've got 3 roles to play. First of all, to be a husband to your wife. Secondly, to be a father. And thirdly, to be a friend. If you can get those 3 right, or at least 2 out of the 3 right on a regular basis, your life's going to be golden. It's going to be so much easier. You talk about how going to reconciliation makes you a better person, and you feel so much better when you're out. If you get these roles right, you're going to feel so much better about yourself, and you're not even going to know you're doing it because you're not going to say, "Oh boy, I feel so much better today because I love my kids." It's just going to be natural to you that you're doing it. So if you get that right, you're going to have so many blessings in your life that you're going to sleep the sleep of the just. I share this regularly, and I actually used it in a homily a few weeks ago, that I go to bed at night and I bless our bed and I say in Our Father, but then I put my head down and I say, Lord, how did I do today? And I pretty much always get a positive answer. My wife will tell you I can go to sleep in 15 seconds, but it's very few nights that I don't get a positive answer because of the things that I do, because of the people I have in my life that are helping me and are helping me grow, and as I help them grow. And so just don't do it alone. Make sure that you're with your wife, you're with your family, and you got a group of guys that you can share your life and your faith with.
Yeah, I think that's so very important. And just a real quick story of my own too. I bless my kids every night, and they actually wouldn't know what to do if I didn't bless them. They would be like, something's wrong. In fact, if I'm out of town, then my wife will do it. If they're staying with their grandparents know that it's their duty to do it. And just beautifully, my son, he recently got back from basic training, and he was getting he's back home, so living with us for a couple months till he goes to college, and I'm blessing the kids, and he comes up, and I said, hey, you're a grown man now. And he said, yeah, but I'm still your child. and so,
Yep.
I was like, oh man, what a beautiful thing. Because even though I'm like, hey, I'm recognizing that you're out there, you're adulting, you get to choose your path. He's like, no, I still want blessed from you, Dad. So that was just a
Well,
beautiful moment, and speaks to what you were speaking about blessing your kids.
well, tell him from me, thank you for his service.
Absolutely.
We need
Absolutely.
to be thanking our veterans on a regular basis.
Well, and so, Deacon, if you could tell us, where can people find your book once again?
Sure. It's deaconjoegrote.com, and Grote is Grote. Makes a wonderful Christmas gift. And if anybody's out there who has employees and you're wondering how you can give them a nice gift for Christmas, and I'm not the original one on this. I've had people say they bought 10 or 15 books to give to each of their employees because they know that a man who's more committed to his family and he's got a stable home life is going to be a better employee in the long run than one that's not. So just a little impetus out there for those of you who have businesses.
Absolutely. I think that's a great plan. All right, Deacon, would you be willing to give us a blessing before we leave today?
I sure will. First of all, blessed Christmas to everyone listening today. We pray for a world that's hurting, for those ravaged by war, for those who are sick and suffering. But we also pray for the blessings in our lives, our family, our friends, our jobs. We've got a roof over our head and a car that runs. We're not going to bed hungry tonight. For these and other blessings we take so often for granted, we ask for your continued grace and protection, and we ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Well, Deacon, thank you so very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and keep praying for us.
I sure will. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day, sir.
You too.
Bye. You are listening to Divine Mercy Radio's Fall Carathon, Light in the Darkness. We've got that carathon goal of 100.